Hi everyone, it's Dr. G. Welcome back to the Sociology Experience. This is the third and final video in our social stratification series. And in this video, I will focus on social class in the US. Let's start with a definition. Social class refers to a large group of people who rank closely to one another in wealth, power, and prestige. These three elements separate people into different lifestyles, give them different chances in life, and provide them with distinct ways of looking at the self and the world. Why is social class important? Well, because it affects every component of our lives in ways that are obvious and also hidden. I want to provide you a few examples of how social class helps us to look at the world and how it shapes our behavior. Let's start with these three examples: food, education, and worldview. As I go through these examples, I would like you to consider how you, as a low-income, middle-income, or high-income person, would look at these three topics. So let's start with food. Generally, what we find is that when poor people or low-income people think about food in the US, they are focused on quantity. Do they have enough food to survive? Where is their next meal coming from? When middle-income Americans think about food, they are focused more on quality. What is the quality of their food? When high-income people think about food, they are focused more on presentation. How will the food be presented to them? Let's think about education. If you are a low-class American, when you think about education, you might be thinking, is it worth it? I need to be out working, earning money, so that I can pay my bills. Is it worth putting all of the time and money into getting a degree? And quite often what poor people will discover is that as they look around and the people that they know don't have degrees, so they may not see the value in getting one. When middle-income Americans think about education, they realize that it is their ticket up the social class ladder. When well-to-do Americans think about education, they are very much focused on prestige, going to the right college or the right university that will provide the right level of prestige that they are looking for. Worldview. What does that mean? Well, what is the world? And if you are a poor person who has lived in the same community their whole life and may not have traveled very far, the world is probably the community. For middle-income Americans, their worldview is probably the nation or the country. For well-to-do Americans who have a lot of business transactions globally and who may also do international travel, their worldview is truly the world. Let me provide you a few more examples of how social class can affect life. Number one, the lower a person's social class, the more likely that individual is to die before the expected age. Number two, higher classes receive medical treatment. Number three, the marriages of the poor are more likely to fail and their children to grow up in broken homes. Number four, people on the bottom of the class structure are less likely to become politically involved and to have their voices heard. Number five, education increases as one goes up the social class ladder. Number six, the poor are much more likely to be on probation, on parole, or in jail. Many other examples could be provided, but because of limited time, we will move forward. So there are three components of social class: wealth, power, and prestige. Let's start with wealth. Wealth consists of property and income. Property is defined as the total value of money and other assets minus any debts, whereas income refers to earnings from work and/or investments. And what we see in the US is that wealth is concentrated in the hands of very few people. So what you're looking at here is the distribution of income and wealth in the US in the year 2015. The middle pie chart shows income. And what it is showing us is that roughly 1/2 or 50% of all of the income in the United States of America goes to the richest 20% of all families. On the right pie chart, we're looking at wealth. And here we see that roughly 90% of all of the wealth in the United States of America is owned by the top richest 20% of all families. I want to go into a little bit more depth about the super rich. So I've already told you that the richest 20% own about 90% of the wealth, but if we were to break it down even more, we would see that the richest 5% own 65% of all the wealth, and the richest 1%, the 1% as they are often referred to, they own 37% of all of the wealth in the United States of America. Mind-boggling. You've probably heard about the growing gap between the rich and the poor. And in fact, there is a growing gap. This chart that you see on the right-hand side of your screen looks over the last 40 years of mean annual income. Now you can see that the bottom 80% of all Americans, their annual incomes have remained relatively stable, and some research shows that their income has actually gone down in value. But if you look at the red line near the top, which represents the highest 20% of all families, you can clearly see that their income has steadily gone up. This brings up a very interesting question. And the question is the American dream a reality? And so what's the American dream? From my understanding, the American dream is if you work really hard and get a degree, you can make anything out of yourself that you would like to make out of yourself. You can have anything that you would like to have. Unfortunately, research seems to support that as the rich are getting richer and richer and holding more income and having more wealth, that there is less left over for the other 80%, and the American dream seems to no longer be a reality. There seems to be some problems in the system, unfortunately. The second major component of social class is power. And power is the ability to carry out your will in spite of resistance. The third and final major component of social class is prestige, which refers to respect or regard. And we commonly evaluate each other according to the kind of work or occupation that we have. And sociologists have measured the relative social prestige of various occupations. And here's what they have found. Here are the top 5 ranked most prestigious jobs and occupations in the United States. At the very top of the list is being a physician, a medical doctor, followed by a physicist astronomer, a college or university professor, an architect, and an electrical engineer. Well, who's now at the bottom of the prestigious ladder? Taxi drivers, household laborers, janitors, door-to-door salesmen, and parking lot attendants. They are at the very bottom of the list. So, question for you. Do you believe that the rich should get all of the income and wealth that they get? Again, I brought up the same slide that I was showing you earlier so that you can reconsider how wealth and income are very concentrated in the hands of very few Americans. I want to provide you an example of what I'm talking about. It's not going to be immediately apparent of where I'm going with this, but hang in there with me and it will make sense eventually. And I want to talk about the Walt Disney Company. I could be talking about any large multinational company, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Walmart, Apple, but I've chosen the Walt Disney Company. Many people don't know that the Walt Disney Company actually owns and runs many different smaller companies. The Walt Disney Company is more than theme parks and a movie theater or a movie production facility. It owns ESPN. Disney owns Marvel, Pixar. It recently acquired Fox Studios and a variety of other businesses. Of course, the Walt Disney Company was a very small company when it was started by Walt many, many, many years ago. But the Walt Disney Company has grown and grown significantly over the years. Interlocking directorates. What is that? An interlocking directorate refers to a business practice wherein a member of one company's board of directors also serves on another company's board or within another company's management. And what you're looking at on the right-hand side are some of the largest companies within the US, and you can see a small number next to the business name, and that represents the number of people on their boards that sit on other people's boards. Let's be more specific on what I'm talking about. Robert Iger was the Chief Executive Officer or the CEO of the Walt Disney Company from 2005 until 2020. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen that he is one of several people that sat on the board of directors of the Walt Disney Company. But Mr. Iger did not only sit on the board as the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, he also was on the board of Apple. All right. Indeed, if you were to go through and look at the list of people on the left-hand side of your screen, you would see that they also sit on boards of other large corporations. Let me share with you who these other people are and what they do for work. One of these people is the former president of Procter & Gamble and is also on the board of McDonald's. One of these people is the CEO or Chief Executive Officer of General Motors. One of these people is the CEO of a company called Oracle. Another is a CEO of a company called Illumina, which is a biotechnology company. Another one of these people is the former executive at Coca-Cola. Another board member at the Walt Disney Company is the CEO of Nike. And one of these other people is the vice president of CVS. So as you can see, the people that sit on the Walt Disney World Company's board are basically chairmen of other large corporations. And this is why it's called interlocking directorates, because they all sit on each other's boards. And one of the major responsibilities of a board is to determine salary. A lot of people think that the salary of a CEO or chief executive officer of a large corporation is determined by how profitable the company he or she runs. But that's not always the case. It's more of a case of, should we say, the good old boy syndrome, where one person kind of watches out for the well-being of another person. So let's look at some numbers here. And we can see that Mr. Iger in 2019 made over 1,000 times more than the typical Disney company employee. His salary for 2019 was over $66 million, whereas the typical Walt Disney Company employee made $46,127. All right, so the reason that I brought up interlocking directorates is because, again, I feel that it's very important to repeat this. A lot of people believe that CEO or chief executive officer pay is based on profitability of the company. The more money the company makes, the higher the salary of the CEO. But during the recession of 2008 to about 2012, 2013, what we generally saw is that when a lot of Americans were losing their jobs, were being laid off, their benefits were being cut, CEO pay only continued to go up. And what can explain this? I think one of the major things that can explain this is interlocking directorates. Research shows that 78% of the top 550 companies in the US's S&P 500 are directly connected through one or more board members. It's the good old boys looking after the good old boys. Finally, we'll wrap up this video looking at poverty in the US. Approximately 14% of the US population is poor. The US government defines the poor as anyone who has income of less than $24,000 in the year 2015, okay? So there are two types of poverty. There's relative poverty, which refers to the lack of resources of some people in relation to those who have more. And there's absolute poverty, which refers to a lack of resources that is life-threatening. Who are the poor in the United States? Children, people of color. Now there are more poor white Americans than people of color, but people of color are highly overrepresented in their categories, and women. Homelessness, it is very hard to determine what the count is for homelessness. They're probably highly underrepresented. In the map that you're looking at on your screen, you can see poverty across the United States in 2015, and the darker color purple represents where poverty is more abundant than in the lighter color blue. All right, we've talked about children, people of color, and women, and there are approximately 550,000 people that are homeless at any given time in the United States, and again, that number is probably underrepresented. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you back soon. Bye-bye.